Okay, afternoon. Sorry to come. So, today I've kind of discussed this in the past on YouTube and in posts and such like that, especially when I had a martial arts school. And I just wanted to go over today for some people who may have not seen my stuff before on which martial art you should choose for your kids and adults. First and foremost, most importantly, you need to know what you want to get out of a martial art program. That's really key. Um, Now, it used to be in martial arts, especially when dads were enrolling their sons, like especially from the 80s, they wanted self defense was usually the top priority. Or dad would probably say teaching his son how to fight. Um, Learning how to fight has become a pejorative in modern society for some incorrect reasons. People think if you know how to fight, um, a person, especially a child, will get into more fights. Like it's a skill, like learning a language. You can actually do many great things with language, or you can cuss somebody out. Um, Same thing with learning. Fighting is a skill. Um, and the better a child or an adult is at it, the less chance they actually have of using it because they don't need to prove themselves. Especially kids or men, and more women in their 20s up into the 20s. Usually, once they hit 30, it doesn't happen. But if you're going out drinking and stuff, or that getting into fights was something that tends to happen for young adults in their 20s and kids, bullied or picked on in school. And parents, the idea of like the word fighting conjures up the child being a bully, where it couldn't be further from the truth. The more fighting prowess a child has, the more chance they have of um, not getting into fights because they don't need to prove anything because they know what they can and can't. And that what's important with that is actually learning a martial art that actually teaches functional martial arts. Nowadays, it's more so mom that tends to enroll kids, and so self defense is usually unless the child is immediately being bullied, it's usually way down on the list on things that are important. Usually things like self confidence or self esteem, uh, discipline, as in like listening to mom or dad doing their chores, uh, something physical to do, a fun activity. Those tend to be the things that are on the um, reasons. And because of that, for years, I used a child development program that used martial arts as a vehicle. That was their tagline. And because it was an easy sell, and moms especially loved that idea. I actually had to turn some dads away that wanted to teach, have their sons learn how to kick ass. Um, Truth be told, you know, since that program only existed from the early 2000s, um, most of us taught martial arts and a martial arts style first, and then those who did that kind of self development program, that was later. Now, a lot of your karates, and I use that term with bad pronunciation on purpose, because I mean Taekwondo, Tang Sudo, your Japanese and Okinawan karate, usually most of the Japanese. A lot of those type of schools have gone to really playing down, not even for children, but even for adults, playing down the martial aspects. And even some schools are basically uh, Tony Robbins seminars in a gi, martial art uniform. And I have a big problem with all that. Is that even the leadership training and all that, like they try basically, or like another example for kids would be Boy Scouts in a gi. Um, so, not that I don't think self-discipline, um, character development, all that is important, but I've been teaching martial arts since 1988. I got in it originally because I was beat up from kindergarten until I started playing football in junior high. It wasn't so much that I stopped being picked on, but I at least learned how to tackle somebody or take punishment. So it wasn't as prevalent. Um, and the reason I'm talking about all this background before I get to actual styles is, a lot of parents just throw the kids into Taekwondo because it's the name they've heard, um, and they don't want to do UFC, in other words, MMA. But a lot of people don't have the idea what mixed martial arts is or MMA. They've heard UFC and they've seen that. I think it's barbaric. They don't want their child doing that. So I'm trying to clear up a few misconceptions before getting to what styles I think kids should learn. Okay. So I personally think, actually from my experience, and once again I've been teaching martial arts since 1988, that you need to have, and I'm going for kids first. Adults is kind of easier, so if you're more interested in the adult program, hold on. I promise I will discuss that too. There's a lot of overlap because I think some of the same styles are just as important, but for different reasons. So even though, as I said, most moms want their kids with the character development, maybe leadership training, self-confidence, they want them to be successful in life. That's one. But more and more, I had a problem, and I was having trouble explaining why people should do my expensive program when they just want to do some fun activity. And martial arts can definitely be that, but it's because I got that a lot when I asked, why do you want to enroll your child? And it's usually definitely the younger age, 3 and 4 year olds. Just a fun activity. But martial arts is so much more. It is truly a life-changing thing. It's community. It's developing lifelong, lasting relationships. When you sweat, beat on each other in class, these type of friendships last lifetimes. Similar to, not the same obviously, but similar to like what guys and gals in the military come through, that type of bonding from that type of environment. And I'm even talking like, it's been a while since America's not been at war, but even like 80s peacetime, the benefits of that kind of martial warrior community. And like, even though, as I said, moms and even dads do now enroll their children with the martial aspect not being on the foremost concept of their mind, for the most part. Different socioeconomic groups have different reasons for getting their kids involved, but in general, that's the case. But I want to state the case that I think that if you only put a kid in basically a character development program or even a child development program, but the martial isn't there, let's say they're doing these silly forms and stuff like that as opposed to learning proper martial arts, like what I mean by like fighting skills. When they get punched in the nose when they have their crappy black belt, then all the self-discipline, self-confidence, all that is just going to go poof because they were a paper tiger. So it's important to have the martial skills back up. And I personally think there's 2 approaches, and I have a video on my YouTube page, and I kind of posted early this morning the 2 ways to teach children. And I said you have the character development route, the child development program that uses martial arts as a vehicle. The most well known of that is the skills program, which I used for years. And then there's teaching martial arts styles and being the priority. But I think it's important that if you teach children, you need to understand child development. Now, I did the child development program route for a long time. It's not what I would recommend for parents. Just because from my point of view, all the benefits and what truly is life-changing is the martial aspect of the skills. And especially for boys, I know more and more we want to treat boys and girls kind of the same, at least from the Twitter crowd, but boys and girls are different. Now, girls can get just as much, if not more. I think women need, especially if girls into women, need self-defense skills, especially, and I'll get into grappling skills. But boys, from a developmental point of view, the hunter-warrior archetype, really need that type of, because you can't roughhouse as much as you can in schools anymore, given California's still closed. But even if we ever open up again, roughhousing hasn't been look favorably upon in schools for a long time. And it's really important for boys' development to truly be boys into real men. Um, you need that type of roughhousing. And a lot of these schools have become, as I said, these focusing more on the character development or child development aspects, throwing away the martial is a mistake. You should teach it. Martial arts schools should be about martial arts first and foremost, with an understanding of how to teach children for children, adults for adults, and even for older people, how to teach them as well. You don't want to be teaching some you want to make sure you know in a class, especially in adults, if you usually have mixed ages, how to approach and help a 20-something-year-old and something in their 60s. It's a very different teaching method. You have to have an environment for adults that can foster both age groups. So first and foremost, you need to decide really what you want out of a martial art program. And once again, I highly recommend that you think martial skills first. Now, for kids or adults, I personally think grappling, such as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Sambo, old school judo, are your best bets to start with. And you're like, you teach like, you specialize in now Muay Thai. Originally, I did Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. Actually, it's what we call a Sogo Bujitsu, which is an old term for a mixed system. And I don't mean mixed martial arts. A lot of traditional schools have tried to combine various arts and try to call themselves mixed martial arts. That's not mixed martial arts, or what you see in the UFC, which for all ranges, I personally think that's the best option. Like, for adults, you should be learning what we call stand-up, which is punching and kicking. And for punching and kicking, hands only boxing. There's nothing better than boxing for just hands. And for punching and kicking, some form of kickboxing. The premier form of kickboxing is Muay Thai. It's called the science of 8 limbs. Punch, kicks, elbows, and knees. And they also have limited what we call clinch, which is range where you can grab somebody. Muay Thai has a really good necktie system and also a little bit of body locks. So from a striking art, it is a fully complete system. So for just striking, it is one of the best. For what we call clinch range, where you're grabbing somebody, that's either dirty boxing, and what I mean, not that you're necessarily going to learn it in boxing, but it's striking in a grabbing range, which Muay Thai has. But primarily what's done in that range, or like I like from, there's an organization called Straight Blast Gym. I like what they talk about, where they talk about more games. Each type of combat is like a mini game. Those who've played video games, you have your main game and you have mini games. So for the clinch game, he's primarily about controlling an opponent, taking them down or throwing them. And there's nothing better for that than wrestling or judo. Some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools have that, but usually the throws are from either wrestling or from judo, because Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a descendant from judo. Then you have groundwork, which is by far Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, some judo schools, and submission wrestling. All right, there's nothing better for that for groundwork. And then if you want to, you can add another game or range, which would be handheld weapons, sticks, knives, etc. Given you can get the more traditional ones, which when my original martial art, I took the Sogo Bujitsu one, called Budo Taijutsu. They do a lot of classical weapons work. And the idea there is if you do enough weapons types, bladed, stick, whatever, that you can pick up any impromptu weapon and use it for self-defense. There is some validity to that, but more so I think it's kind of a fun traditional thing to do. It has some minor self-defense aspects to it. So, like my first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor, I liked his concepts given. He was a BJJ instructor, so he's going to say this, but I like what he believed. Like, you teach ground first to people. That way, because if you're unskilled in fighting skills, you're going to get taken to the ground. and have to deal from this, or like a person's bigger, stronger, and it's easy to get knocked to the ground. Then you should learn clinch range, throwing, and dirty boxing, because if you are confident on the ground, then you have no problem going in and throwing people or taking them down. And then learn striking, punches, kicks, elbows, knees, for the fact that if you are confident to be taken to the ground, you're confident in clinch range, then you can have striking, so you're not afraid to mix it up. If you're the whole idea about confident in a certain game or range is that if you're afraid to clinch, when you strike people, when people are getting hit, they're going to grab you and close distance, or because if you're beating them, and if you're afraid or incompetent in that range, you will lose in those ranges. So that was the idea of that progression. So with that, I highly recommend, especially for children, but also for adults in an ideal world, and the ideal world is more kids, is to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There's no progression damage as long as you tap. You can avoid injury. Usually, once in a while you have a jerk in class, but usually if you find the proper school, you don't have those who put stuff on so far hard and fast that you don't have time to tap. But those injury factors are easy to find and avoid. If you tap often and do it to protect yourself and are taught why you should tap, especially to teach kids to tap, it's a really safe thing to do. Plus, even for self-defense, given any form of altercation in most schools will get a kid expelled. A lot of times, even if he's defending himself, just remember you can always fight that. Now, legally, rapping, and it's not like everybody thinks of just BJJ as ground fighting. It's not just for being on the ground. Like if you can learn how to control somebody's body, tie up limbs, things like that, even standing up, you can stop them from hitting you, and you can have very good control on an opponent. The only caveat I have, and the problem is, it's really hard to teach kids grappling and keep them interested. The Gracie Academy has a great thing called your kids program is kind of like grappling games, and for the younger kids, and I think that is a really good thing. In general, as people know from my videos, I believe that you need to do game-based learning anyways. If you can find a jiu-jitsu school or a judo school that has a heavy-duty groundwork, then you can keep them involved. But grappling tends to have, for children, has a higher dropout right now. Adults, if you find the right school that introduces you to grappling in a decent manner, a lot of schools, especially when I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, had I continued, I'd be a lot more proficient, but I've been on and off for a lot of years done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I started in year 2002, 5, something like that. So had I continued, I would have definitely been a black belt in that. But my black belt is in Budo Taijutsu. My 10th degree black belt is in Budo Taijutsu, which is a classical system that has old school grappling in it, but very little groundwork and not the most efficient training methods. And that's the thing. The reason also a lot of these styles I'm going to recommend are their teaching methodology. Biggest thing I can say is, and people is sport type martial arts. And people go, well, you don't tend to recommend Taekwondo for striking. That's because the rule set discourages punching and encourages fancy, unrealistic kicks. They're really beautiful, very cool, and take a great deal of athleticism to pull off, but they're not that practical. And the sparring rules make for fancy stuff to watch, but doesn't transfer over necessarily as well to self-defense. The reason sports-based martial arts, really, especially grappling ones, MMA, mixed martial arts, what most people think of as like cage fighting or UFC, judo, all of wrestling. These all are really important for the fact that you can test your skills. sparring is important, but competition is a whole nother level. Bruce Lee used to be quoted as saying that um, learning martial arts, like forms and like non like resistance training, was like learning to swim on land. So I use the analogy myself that compliant drills are like learning to swim on land. Basically, his analogy. But building upon that, sparring is like, or a live, what I call live drills. Once again, thank you, Straight West Gym, for those concepts. It's just like swimming in a pool. Competition is like swimming in a lake. Real self-defense, real fighting. And given, when I say fighting, I don't necessarily mean barroom brawls per se, unless you're assaulted by it, because that is just kind of like really unsanctioned competition. Most bar fights tend to be something most people could walk away from, and it's very much like an unsanctioned fight with less rules. But even sometimes the crowd will enforce certain unwritten rules depending on culture, etc. When I mean fighting or self-defense, I mean being assaulted. So that's what I call swimming in the ocean. You got sharks, choppy water, undertow. You can never ever, and ethically, it's not a great thing to try to go around and get assaulted or assault people. And also health-wise, legal, there's tons of different ramifications for that. But unfortunately, that is the only true way to get better at real fighting, is being those. Okay? There's nothing that comes close. All our training we ever do is trying to get as close as we can to that without the legal, moral, physical, health issues that are associated with that. So a martial arts school has to have a lot of sparring, which is once again swimming, like swimming in a pool. And ideally, I always recommend people should compete, at least a little bit. I've had people who are mediocre grapplers, and we do an open grappling tournament, and their level would skyrocket. There's something about having competed, even though rolling can be similar to a competition, and you can like have in-house tournaments. That's not the same thing. There's something about going to an actual tournament fight for Muay Thai and MMA that totally raises your game. And once again, it's one step closer to swimming in the ocean or real fighting. Okay, so once again, I said I recommend grappling first. Teaches great, and like from a child development point of view, it teaches great bodily control, understanding body balance. If you go to a judo school or a good BJJ school that teaches throws, they should teach you also ukemi or rolling and break falls, which also are great for everyday life. I've gone over the handlebars with my bicycle, roller when I was learning to rollerblade when I was younger. All those things. I've learned to fall so many times, and it saved my life so many times. My judo instructor was hit by a car, given the impact, did a lot of damage to him, but he rolled over the hood, so it absorbed a lot of the impact. So learning how to fall is a great skill that grappling, especially judo, will teach you. And the great thing about judo, especially for schools, I'm not really trying to plug different schools here, but for judo, once they open again, in West LA, which years ago used to be called Sawtell, because I used to, there's Sawtell Judo, which is a couple blocks over from actually the street Sawtell. We're in the Japanese community center. When LA opens up again, they've been around since 1929. I can't recommend them highly enough for judo, and they do a lot of groundwork too. So I would say it's probably 55-45, like throwing the throws to groundwork. So and also compared to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's really economic. Like I don't want to say cheap. It's inexpensive. You get the best bang for your buck. It's like $30 a month, or was before COVID, and they have tons of training. They're like 2-hour classes. So I can't recommend that enough. As I said, if you can find a place that has a good kids fun game-based kids program for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I highly recommend it. As I said, the only problem, even though that's an ideal world, kids should learn grappling first. Wrestling is instinctive to all of us. And if your kids in junior high or high school, or middle school, I guess now, get them on the wrestling team if you can. If they have like a JV wrestling, even the skills that are going to learn from that, learning hard work, dedication, there's nothing that beats that in wrestling. They go really learn how to push themselves. Once again, it's relatively safe to get pinned. That's it. There's no submissions in like middle school or high school wrestling. Plus, if you never know, it may be good and get a scholarship to college with that. Depends how good they are. But for martial arts schools, there's even martial arts schools that teach wrestling or submission wrestling. Submission wrestling is basically freestyle or Greco-Roman wrestling with added submissions, locks, chokes, etc. I know that scares a lot of moms that get chokes. Chokes are actually really safe blood chokes, more so than getting hit. And it's also really, because you can also control an opponent. And I can't recommend, like, there's so many benefits to grappling, especially like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Sambo, old school Judo. Once again, if you can get a program that your kid will want to stay in. And that's the challenge. As I said, most parents put their kids in Taekwondo, which, even though it does have a sparring and competition avenue, I do not like it for the rule set. It teaches some really bad habits, especially Olympic Taekwondo. The hands stay low near the body to protect the legal targets as opposed to keeping your hands up, which is a skill for self-defense you want to build. Plus the fact that no punching to the face kind of teaches some really bad habits. It's well known, and a lot of those schools have great kids programs, so that's why they tend to be popular. But more and more, your other martial arts schools, on the type I recommend, are getting better and better at teaching kids. Especially the more successful schools have learned how to understand child development and how kids learn. So don't just go to a Taekwondo school because it's the most known. And I know, like, there's a temptation, like, if their friends are training at the school, to put them in that school. But if you go to a school that with a functional martial art program, your kids are also going to learn some new friends, and so they'll have different sets of friends. So expand the different types of friends and people they're going to meet. It's always wanting, like, go where your friends are training. If they're training at a good functional martial art school, yes. So once again, grappling schools. Now, harder to find is a good Muay Thai kids program, like the one that I actually saw a kids Muay Thai program for martial arts schools to implement. Now, there are some good Thailand, and kids in Thailand are in a totally different situation because even kids are doing Muay Thai to get out of poverty, kind of like boxing was in America in the early 1900s. But even like to a much bigger degree. Kids live, sleep, train full time from age 5 in Thailand. So America's Muay Thai is very different. So a lot of American Muay Thai gyms haven't developed until recently really good programs. So it's hard to find a good kids program that is fun. Once again, game based. You need to have fun. The kids have to have fun to learn. Now, striking, punching, kicking, that is what more people think of martial arts. And so it's an easier sell even for the kids because they learn, cool punching. People like hitting, especially Muay Thai, they're hitting pads, hitting bags, things like that, which is a lot more fun than punching in air type thing. It's more fun to hit pads and things like that. They can, everybody likes hitting a punching bag, which is why fitness kickboxing, especially for women, but men as well, has become so popular because it's, hitting a bag or pads is a lot of fun. So I would recommend, if you can find a kids program for Muay Thai that is truly not just a watered down adult program, and they teach the age group of your child, put them in that program. Um, so, and same for adults. Same thing. I would recommend Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Judo. Make sure, if you can, find a BJJ school that has a lot of throws. Talk to instructors, like how often they teach throws, things like that. Because, yeah, ground fighting is important if you get knocked to the ground or fights ends up there. But for self-defense, knowing how to throw someone and hit them with the planet is going to really help you. You can throw them and run away. Um, and outside of the ring, the reason striking is great, but in real self-defense, you don't want to punch as often unless you've got to the body or shots that aren't going to break your hand. Elbows and knees, which is why I love Muay Thai, are some of the best self-defense tools out there, especially the knee. Knee is extremely dangerous and breaking ribs, things like that. But once again, ground grappling, stand-up grappling, striking is adults should learn MMA basically. Well, what about Krav Maga? My only problem with Krav is it's anywhere from Jewish karate, like what I mean by that is forms like not functional, all the way to hardcore like Israeli military. Okay, there is such a wide variance on what Krav Maga schools teach. Some have sparring, some don't. It's hard to. I could if I knew of a good school, like a specific one, I could recommend. But as a style, it's hard to recommend because quality varies so much. These people love these drills where somebody attacks and you do a bunch of things to them, and it looks really cool. Similar to martial arts that have either forms or compliant drills. If an attacker only hits once, punches once, kicks once, and they stand there while you do things to them, it's not functional. It can be a stage in learning, like if you're learning how to do a technique or a series of techniques. But if you don't get into non-compliant drills where a person can move around and resist, and or sparring, I can't recommend. That's once again, for adults or kids, whether you compete or not, and I recommend even at low level, even for older adults, even older adults. There's a great video posted on Facebook not too long ago about this 90-year-old woman, actually a couple 90-year-old women, I think they're 90 or 80, competing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So you're never too old to compete. Just be safe about it. That's a great thing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Like striking, I fought Muay Thai in my 40s. I don't recommend. I heard this guy in Thailand started at 50, a Western guy, not Thai. And he's doing okay. I don't know how great he is, but he's competing at 50. I don't recommend it. The healing time for getting hit just sucks. When I was training, I had students that were in their 20s. It took them about a week or two to heal up. It took me a couple months. So, striking arts, if you're older, I don't necessarily recommend competition. Definitely sparring, or like if you find a gym that does smokers, which are, think of inter-school sparring. I know a lot of fighters out there are gonna that's not really what a smoker is. I'm being really overgeneralized. In California, technically, I wouldn't say illegal. People would say illegal. It's not illegal. The Boxing Commission frowns upon smokers in California, but that's why I'd say inter-gym sparring or competition, because that's really important. It's lower level. It's less than amateur. It's safe, but you do get that competition feel. So even if you never compete in Muay Thai or kickboxing or MMA, I recommend that level because it will teach you a lot. Yeah, but yeah, for adults, I would go to a good mixed martial art or MMA gym. That way you learn all ranges of games, stand up, clinch, and ground. That means, and if you have one that also teaches Kali, ideally Dog Brothers version called Dog Brothers Martial Arts, which is rare. But if you could do that or supplement your gym's training with some Dog Brothers training, like seminars, things like that, I would highly recommend that for stick and knife and also gun defense. But for kids and adults, once again, my recommendations don't change. It just, as I said, it's harder to get kids to stick with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or ground grappling. That's why a good judo school you could look into, and also it's inexpensive and the best bang for your buck. So if they want to quit, you're not out as much money. But this is a big thing I want to say to parents. It's not, I wouldn't say it's bonus content, but it's kind of like important to me. So many parents out there don't want to force their kids to do things. They're never going to learn stick-to-itiveness or not quitting things if you don't force them when they're young to not quit things. You could set up, like if they're going to start martial arts, you could set up you have to do this for at least 6 months or 3 months or whatever you think. I would say a year. Make them commit to a year. If it's something they say they want to do, they'll learn a lot. They'll have some base level self-defense if you're going to a good martial arts school. So it won't be a waste of time. Anything under 3 months is basically a waste of time. I'm not saying that there's trial programs out there are useful because you can get a taste like for schools, but if they're going to do martial arts, make them commit. I know a lot of parents, modern parents don't want to force their kids to do things. You need to. I've seen it time and time again. Adults who did martial arts as kids come to me and say, "Oh, I wish my parents had not let me quit." That's a big thing. Plus, just for success training for the future, kids have to learn that you have to stick to stuff to be successful, even when it's not necessarily fun anymore. A good martial arts school should make kids' classes fun, but anything that when it's new is really fun. Even if classes are taught well and fun, kids would rather sit down and play video games. So make your kids go to class. I'm saying this for all martial arts school instructors out there to help give them some support. If you're watching this and you're enrolled in martial arts school, go to class, even if you're in a place that can only do Zoom classes. Now, as a final note, I'm going to put it down here. Even though this is I put this on my Kids Muay Thai program, Muay Thai Kids, which is a plug-and-play program for martial art Muay Thai gyms. Even though I'm also streaming this on some of my other pages, so final note I'm going to put at the end. I teach kids in adult privates. I mostly focus on Muay Thai, but the kids program, I can do an all-around stand-up clinch ground program for kids, and we can do that in the safety of your home or in the park. I teach single and group privates, which give them a lot of intention. You get some of the benefits of a group class with the benefits from private lessons as well. So if you're interested in that, you can hit me up as well in the South Bay area, which is south of, I don't know what people are watching, but south of LA. So I hope this video is useful. Once again, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, Muay Thai, adults, MMA. Even though a lot of the MMA gyms will a lot of times make you start off with just striking or just grapple. I'd say probably the vast majority start you out with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Or separate classes, and later once you get a basic fundamentals in both, they'll allow you to do a full MMA class. So you're not going to probably be doing. Some will have a MMA beginners program, which is real teaching the fundamentals of everything at the same time. I kind of like that, but a lot of gyms out there will make you learn separate first and then go to a combined class. Different concepts, but both work as well. So those are my recommendations. Even if you want martial arts, the self-defense or fighting aspects are not important to you compared to all the other benefits, if you focus on functional martial arts, all the other stuff are going to get ingrained deeper and more sound in your child. So I hope to see you on the next video.